welcome to DC Conversations. My first question is, production is not now limited to human resources. It's also, moving towards AI. So what is the relevance of GDP and per capita income in this scenario?
Well, first, the movement to AI is slow. It's not yet. There are interesting applications which can be very helpful to humanity, but it's still a slow process. So, in the meantime, you know, the world goes on, and
Yeah.
all the usual stuff, your employment, my employment, still goes on. Over time, things will change. Three things can happen. Some people can lose their jobs because AI can substitute for them. That's true of any technology.
Yeah.
It will be a help to some people. You know, already journalists are starting to write their articles starting with a script given by
Chat
ChatGPT,
GPT. Yes.
and that's number two. And number three is a whole lot of new jobs can be created. You saw with the internet,
Yeah.
data analytics became a big issue, and now many institutions are churning out graduates in big data, data analytics. So I think all three will happen. How much of each we'll have to see, but I don't think, so long as AI is not used for bad purposes, and of course that is a real danger,
Yeah.
but so long as that is not a big portion, it can be a very big contributor to our well-being.
Global financial architecture is dependent on US dollars, and several countries fund US deficit by hoarding US dollars. How long do you think will this continue, and won't diminishing marginal utility apply for US dollars? When countries no longer want to store more dollars in their central banks, what will happen to the global economy?
Well, so far it hasn't happened, right? So far, the US dollar has been a sought after asset.
Yeah.
And if you think about what the alternatives are, it's hard to find something as liquid and as readily transactable, which also holds its value.
Yeah.
Now, in the longer run, maybe some other currency will come, but right now, there is no alternative to the US dollar.
Yeah. And US Fed hinted slashing interest rates, and their
I don't think
reports.
they said that. I think the markets assumed that. I
Yeah.
think the Fed said that, Chairman Powell said that we probably are near the peak or at the peak. That is all he really said.
Yeah.
The interpretation was, and looking at the dot plots, that they would cut interest rates next year, which perhaps is not incorrect. But the word you used was slash. I don't think they ever said that they would slash.
Okay, but you don't foresee any kind of global recession happening again?
I don't know. I think there's a lot of uncertainty right now.
Hmm.
And it is possible that if inflation doesn't come down fast enough, the Fed will not have room to cut. Interest rates will stay higher for longer, which may mean some more slowing than anticipated at this point. So I think it's too early to say we know how the next year will play out.
And when can the world get out of stimulus back to a growth zone?
Well, I think that's what we talk about in our book, Breaking the Mold. It's about India's part to growth. But I think India will be a big part of global growth if it can focus on, you know, some of the areas we talked about. See, China as an engine for growth is slowing because China is already very big. Which is the next economy which is capable of being a growth engine? It is India.
Yeah.
So, what are the things that India can focus on to be that engine of growth for the global economy, to become developed faster? And I've said in many fora, India needs to grow faster,
Yeah.
both to create jobs as well as to become a rich country in the kind of time span that many people think it will. And so, how do we increase our rate of growth? We have to rethink on what our strengths are
Yeah.
and focus on them. And the book we've written, Rohit Lamba and I, Breaking the Mold, is really about what areas are worth focusing on. And we say, you know, India has a very high presence in services. When I go around Hyderabad, I see all those companies which have set up here, which are employing lots and lots of people from this area. That's an example of where we excel, and where global companies are flocking to India. We should think about how to encourage that.
Yeah. So talking about growth, do you think that $5 trillion is too ambitious for
You know,
India?
we get stuck in really some some issues which really are quite meaningless. 5 trillion is a number.
Yeah.
We're throwing that out as if, once we reach that, we will be truly great.
Right.
I mean, we have a long way. We are doing well. We have to go for a long way. So some minister throws out the number and says we will do it by X. I
Yeah.
mean, when you look at the details, it doesn't follow that that's possible.
Yeah.
So I think we should basically focus on doing our homework. And again, that's what the book is about. What homework we need to do to become, why 5 trillion? Why not 10? Why not
True.
15?
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, we are a large country. And so we should not rest happy when we've achieved 5.
Yeah.
We have a long way to go beyond that.
Yeah. And you said recently that if we don't grow faster, we'll grow old before we grow rich.
That's just a simple mathematical, right? We are a country which is young now, but if you look at the South is already growing at a very low rate in terms of population.
Yeah.
It's still the North and the Northeast which is growing at a fast rate because they're poorer in some parts than the South. But as they grow richer, they will also start having fewer children. The entire population growth will slow down. So there's a period in which population will grow, but then it'll slow down and it'll start. As soon as it slows down, the aging of the population also starts. So what we have to understand is that, at some point we will also be aging, just like everyone else, unless we accept a huge amount of immigration. And that, to my mind, doesn't seem right now on the cards. So if we are already a very densely populated country, immigration is going to be difficult. We are aging. So when does that happen? My sense is when you look at all the population calculations, it's probably around 2050 or 2047 if you want to define it around Amritkal. So the question is, how long do we have to get rich? And the calculation was simply if we put it as 24 to 30 years, then if we are growing at 6% a year, we don't get to be what is defined as rich in today's terms, which is much more than the per capita GDP we will reach at that point.
Yeah, and you also said, talked about two cities in India which are functioning like first world economies. How do you define first world economies?
I don't. What I meant was the lifestyle there and the kind of per capita incomes.
Yeah.
And the congregation of the upper middle class is very strong there. Just throughout Noida and Gurgaon, because I'd been there. But if you look at Cyber City in Hyderabad,
Yeah.
that's also spectacular. You look at Bangalore
Yeah.
and many parts of Bangalore. I mean, so our metros have many parts which look really spectacular. But we also have to recognize there's large parts of India which are poorer and have sort of don't generate the kind of jobs that these engines do. And so what we have to ask is, how do we generate more growth, more education, more healthcare in that part of the country? And again, the book is about how do we lift everyone rather than focus only on the places which are growing. We say that, services based growth, especially advanced services, is possible for India because we're doing it out of Gurgaon, we're doing it out of Cyber City. But we also need to think about how we elevate everybody else. How do we create jobs for everyone?
Yeah.
And so that's the second part of the equation we need to think about. How do we get sustainable, equitable growth?
So talking about GDP, there are a lot of unaccounted transactions that happen. There's a lot of cash transactions that are happening. So do you think the number is different, the actual number?
No, I don't think that people necessarily go to the, how much of black money is there and unaccounted for in the GDP. I think there are lots of guesses about this. By its very nature, it's hard to measure. I think there were a bunch of reports on this. I think every country has a certain amount.
Yeah.
And look, it's very, very hard. Given that we find it hard to measure, even the real activity, the genuine activity, to try and guess what the fraction of black money is, I think, not. I mean, we don't have much success in doing that.
Yeah. What role does infrastructure play in the development trajectory of a nation?
Well, I think infrastructure, whether physical or virtual, virtual infrastructure is also becoming important. Access to broadband, for example. Uh, Both those things are quite important in creating the opportunities for people. That's one aspect. In the book, we talk about other aspects. We talk about how, in addition to creating that physical infrastructure, perhaps our biggest asset is the human capital of people.
Yeah.
And so you need to improve the human capital of people. What does that mean? It means that we need much better education, right? Right from
Yes.
the school to the college to the university. It means that we need much stronger healthcare systems because, today we find that, yes, again, in some of the spectacular cities, access to healthcare is, to the best healthcare in the world is possible.
Yeah.
But in many areas, access to even moderate healthcare is difficult. Few doctors, and so we need to, create access. And there are lots of examples we give in the book on how we can resolve this, how people are solving it in India. So, in a sense, we in India have to learn from ourselves what we are doing and how we are doing it well. And in that way, we can progress quite effectively. I think what we keep saying is we shouldn't be comfortable with where we are. We should be aspirational about where we want to get. And that means aspirational about our single biggest problem, jobs. How do we create the jobs for the people we have? And how do we train people for the jobs that they want? We need to do both. We need to do a lot more of that now in order to succeed, to increase our rate of growth. So lots to do, but I think what we keep saying in the book is there is hope that India can do it. And the book is giving you an alternative path, saying maybe the path that we are on is something we need to think about. What are the changes we need to make to get that higher rate of growth, to become rich before we become old? So
Yeah.
sometimes it's depicted in the newspapers, I'm pessimistic about that. No, because newspapers often report a biased version of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we have the potential to do much more. We should think about that rather than be complacent with our current rate of growth.
Right. And has liberalization happened on the ground to the extent it should for the economy to take off faster?
I think we can always explore places where we can liberalize a little more.
Yeah.
There are also often places where you need to regulate a little more.
Mm.
And so that mix has to constantly be thought of. What do we need to do to help, um, you know, sort of tear away the rules which are holding us back? But also, rules are sometimes very useful in making sure we don't go off track completely.
Yeah. And what are the gaps in equitable growth of the economy that are noticeable as India moves up in global rankings?
I think the rankings are about overall GDP. When you look at per capita GDP, we are still a poor country. $2,500 per capita, approximately. And we need to make that distinction. When we overtake the UK, we are overtaking them on overall GDP. That's because there is 67 million person country. We are a 1.4 billion people country. So we're about, 20, 25 times their size.
Yeah.
So when you translate into per capita GDP, we're still far behind the UK. And this is a distinction that your audience, our people, need to understand. That when I say we have a long way to go before we become rich, I'm talking about per capita GDP. That is how much each person earns or makes. We can do it, but we need to do more homework to do it. We can't assume it will happen. Yes, we will overtake Germany and Japan in overall GDP in the next few years. But we will still be far behind China because in per capita GDP, China is much above us, about 4 or 5 times our size,
Mm.
and it has as many people as we have. So that's why China has a huge economy. It'll take us a long time to reach near China. It'll take us a long time to reach near USA as overall size. But in terms of per capita GDP, if we want to reach near them, we have to do a lot of work, which is what we talk about in the book.
Okay, any concluding remarks you'd like to say?
I think I'm very optimistic about what India can do, but I think it needs to focus on its strengths. And one of its most important strengths is its democracy.
Yeah.
It needs to stay democratic. It needs to strengthen its democratic sort of institutions. It also, one of the important points we make in the book is needs to decentralize more if it wants to create the capabilities of improving the human capital of the people. And so there is, the book is not just about economics. By the way, it's readable by even non economists.
Yeah.
But it's also about how we change the political system to make it more compatible with the economic system. What we believe is there's a tendency to go in the other direction, to be more like China, to be more authoritarian, to focus more on the low end of manufacturing. That we believe will be detrimental to the country, will not provide the jobs that we need in the longer run. And so a refocusing is extremely important if we want to go in the right direction.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.